My name is Cooper Boudia. I was born in Olympia, Washington. Started out first car, Honda Civic. It was a 91 SI. It was the teal. Not really what I wanted, but it's like your first car. You kind of just get what you get from, growing up with your family. And it was my sister's car before it was mine. So I kind of took it and, did my own thing with it. I don't really know how exactly I even got into, cars and Hondas specifically. Like when I grew up, none of my family's into cars. It was just kind of, I'm the only one in the family who really is a car enthusiast, My dad had a whole bunch of different cars when I was growing up. He had like an old 60s Bug and a 50s International pickup and just kind of like a range of different cars, but none of them were ever really nice. They were all just cars that he had and cars that he fixed up. One of them was like a Pacer. I don't even know if you guys know what that is, but it's just a funky looking car. Big back window, it's like a hatchback. But so yeah, from then I kind of had the Civic for a long time. Ended up blowing a head gasket on it. Did a little D15 swap that was way more expensive than it should have been. I had a shop do it, and that was kind of my first experience with a shop. And it kind of just, you wait a long time and you kind of get told things, this and that, and you end up waiting and you finally get that car back. And I had it back for a few days, and I was driving it around, and the motor dropped on one side. They forgot to torque down one of the bolts. So the transmission side engine mount bolt dropped, and it landed on the axle, and the car just pretty much hardly wanted to move. So I had that towed back to them and got it fixed, and that was the sign for me that I never want to deal with a shop ever again. It was a really rough experience, and it was just not worth what you get in the end. So that's kind of what made me want to start working on my own things. And from there I slowly just started doing little things to the car. I did a header and exhaust and intake and just the basic stuff that you would do when you get a car. You just bolt-ons, that's where you start. A while after that, I ended up just kind of getting bored of that car and ended up, selling it to get something else. I kind of went through a few different cars after that. Not anything you'd expect. I had an '89 Lincoln Town Car. I think it was a boat, and it was a huge sedan, super long. I just ended up getting it because it was super low miles and a good deal for my family friend. So I drove that for a little bit. Had a GMC Sonoma pickup. I ended up selling both of those, and just kind of was looking for a car. Didn't really know what I wanted. I had a buddy in high school who had a Milano red Integra. It was the years earlier, so it was a 94 to 97 body style, and it was an LS as well, but he had a huge turbo on it. It was crazy. It was super sleeper, had LS webs, Sparco Sprint seats, big blacked out front mount intercooler, and I mean that thing was just super fast for me. For me getting into cars, I would hang out with him and we'd go up to Kent and go to the street races and stuff, and for me it was just his car was fast, so it really made me want to get an Integra. And honestly, I figured I would do an LS turbo setup on my Integra, but I found this Integra in, I can't even remember where exactly. I got it from someone up north. They came and met me down in and I looked at the car. They were the first owner. It was super clean, all stock, everything was original. I ended up staying in contact with them, and they ended up wanting to go to Oregon for something, and I wanted the car, so they ended up bringing the car down to Olympia. I ended up getting it here in Olympia, and it's kind of where this car started for me. That was in 2007, right before I graduated high school. So didn't do a lot to the car right away. I had a lot of things I wanted to do. The first thing I did was some Tanabe, race spring inches, but it was still on stock wheels, and ended up getting some Rota GT3s, some 16-inch gunmetal. I got them from Axiom Motorsports in Tacoma. I don't even know if that shop's still around anymore, but yeah, I ended up getting those from Axiom Motorsports and ran those for a while, and I started like looking in, you know, I was on Honda Tech, and all these guys from the Pacific Northwest are like, I mean, they're just, their cars, their builds, so their cars, their builds are just like super clean, and I mean, like, from what I remember, all there was like super nice EKs. Like, that's all I could remember is, you know, Jeff and Toto and Ty and, oh man, you know, Yee Sirius was like, he was the guy who had like the craziest build, you know, one at the time. In my opinion, it was K-swapped, and you'd see him like, you know, California with like Hassback and all those guys, and you see these pictures and it's like, man, these cars are just so well done. You just makes you want to do, you know, quality things to your car, you know, real parts and no fake parts, and you know. So from there I ended up looking at getting some real wheels. You know, I wanted to start trying to do the right thing with building the car, and so I ended up selling the GT3s and got some Inky RPF ones. Those were my first wheels that were real, like real wheels that I bought. You know, so from there I kind of just started doing little things to the car myself. Like, I bought a Type R lip and it was white, and I sanded it all down in my driveway and ended up like rattle canning it with Milano Red rattle can, and that was kind of like the first big thing that I did when I started doing things myself. I started just trying to do what I could when I could, and so I painted that front lip, and I took the stock muffler and polished the crap out of the stock muffler, and I don't even know how many hours I spent sanding it down, and just did that all in my driveway. I was living with my parents at the time because I was, you know, just out of high school, and so I was just doing little stuff to the car. So it kind of just progressed from there. I didn't really have a lot of plans. I just was driving it. I, you know, did a little wire tuck on just like the headlight harnesses and stuff. That was just like slow little things, you know. The car really didn't get a lot done until I ended up not getting a timing belt done when I should have, and ended up skipping some teeth on the timing belt, and that kind of put a damper and stop to things that were going on. But yeah, like this whole build process for me started when I had never built or anything like that, so it started when the belt was done, and I was originally just going to do LSV Tech, but ended up deciding just to not go that route. Just decided to do I found a GSR block on Craigslist. I started piecing everything together just off, you know, most of the things I found were either on Honda Tech or NWP or Craigslist. I tried to do it all. You know, I was working at Starbucks at the time and didn't make a ton of money, but you know, I wanted to do the build right, and so I just slowly started collecting parts, you know. Like, I ended up having to share a car with a girlfriend for a while just because my car was down from that, and what happened to be a short build idea in my head ended up turning into a 2-year process of, you know, completely tearing apart the bay, emptying out the bay, redoing pretty much everything on the whole car, from, you know, undercarriage to the outside. It was every little thing I pretty much pulled apart and put it back together, and that was the first time I built a car like to that extent. I had never done anything besides, you know, little wire tucks here and there, and so yeah, it was, I mean, I've had this car, man, it's crazy to think I've had this car for almost 13 years now, and I mean, it's just kind of slowly evolved over time into what it is now. Like, I never expected to have a car this long, to be honest. It was just something that it's kind of just happened over time now, and I don't ever see myself, you know, letting it go or getting rid of it for any reason. But yeah, I mean, this car is, it's kind of become like, when you have something so long, it's almost like a part of you, and you enjoy it so much when you get to enjoy it. And but when we were building the car, pretty much we did all the work in the garage. The only thing I didn't have done in the garage was engine machining. I had all the machining done at a local machine shop, and I mean, that was something I just couldn't do myself, but we painted the bay in the garage, a little 2-car garage. But yeah, it was a buddy of mine, Eli, came and helped me. I pretty much prepped everything. I emptied out the bay, started cleaning it out, and then he pretty much came over, brought a compressor and gun, and he just shot it all in the garage. And it's the same paint that we did in 2009, I think, is when we did the paint in the bay, and that's when like the main build happened was around that time. But yeah, so when I was building the car too, a lot of it was first for me. Like, I hadn't done an engine harness tuck before, so like I pulled the engine harness apart and put it all back together, and rerouted it through the firewall. And originally, when I went to go start the car, originally it just was nothing. There was no turnover. Didn't want to start. It was the worst feeling, because after you spend all that time getting the car back together, and just to have it not start was, you kind of shut down a little bit. You're kind of bummed out. So I ended up going through the whole harness, all the plugs again, repinned and depinned all the plugs that it could have been, and I happened to put 2 wires just flipped. That was it. It was a wire right next to another wire. They were all like the same color yellow with like slightly different like stripes or dimples on it, and it was like, flip those wires and car started right up. So like that was a huge relief, knowing that besides that little upset, it ended up working out. So like doing things yourself can be challenging, but when you run into those issues that you don't think you can fix, and then you just try and you end up getting that key to turn over and the car to turn on, it's just like a really rewarding feeling. The bummer was I was supposed to go down to IBOC meet for my first IBOC meet ever, and it was the last one that they did at the IBOC facility in Corona. And so I ended up missing that because I couldn't get the car started and I couldn't get to the tune, and so I ended up completely just missing that whole event and the drive down. So that was kind of a bummer. But a few months later, there was another meet, the Chronicles. A lot of you guys, I'm sure, know Sticky Dojo, and he puts on a meet every year, and he's kept it at the IBOC facility. And I really, since I missed that one at IBOC, I really wanted to try to make the show that he puts on. So I ended up hitting him up on NWP and was like, hey, I missed IBOC. I'd really like to come down. It'd be awesome to, show the car at IBOC. And he was like, yeah, if you make the trip down, there'll be a spot for you. So I planned that out. I pretty much got the car tuned. I had it tuned at Fluid Motorsports before they shut down. It was a small shop in Tacoma, but they were the only one that could get me in that short amount of time. So I ended up having the car tuned there, and a little while after, that's when I made the road trip down from Washington to Southern California. It's my first long road trip and first trip with the car after doing any of that work. I mean, it was my daily driver, so it was already a driver already, but I hadn't driven it any extent of that far after it had been built. So it was a real test to see what the car could do and how the car would do on the trip. But I ended up, making the drive all the way down, stayed with a buddy of mine. We ended up staying in his place in, it was Central California, so San Luis Obispo. So we were still 3 or 4 hours north of Corona. So I ended up staying there, and we got up early and drove to Corona with another good buddy who I ended up becoming longtime friends with. Him and his brother, Javi and Miguel. They had a Civic, an EK4 inspired Civic, and so we just linked up, and the two of us rolled down to the Chronicles meet, and it was our 2 cars and the 4 of us, and I mean, it was just a cool experience, just cruising, and we drove the coast down. So it was like, for me, it was all just like kind of surreal. It was a cool experience. I'd never been down to California that far, and taking the coast down, and ended up getting down to Corona, and we washed the car at some random car wash right before, and then we just headed over to the meet. And that was the first time that I got to like really show the car. And I had already looked up to a lot of cars in California, and it was always cool to see their builds on, you know, the forums and stuff like that, but to actually get down and see the cars in person was something that was just, it was just a cool experience. It was just something you get to see firsthand how they do it, and kind of motivates you and inspires you to, you know, want to do it to a, you know, just a good quality. But so while we were down there, we left the meet, and on the way back to my buddy's house, we were driving, and I was getting tired just from all the driving back, and you know, from Washington down. And I asked him if we could switch drivers, and we get out of the car, and there's smoke just pouring out of my hood. You know, I'm just like, what? I had no idea what it was. Open the hood, nothing. It doesn't look like anything's wrong, nothing's out of place or anything like that. Look under, and there's just oil just dripping on the header, just like dripping and dripping and dripping. And it's like, luckily I'd packed some oil with me, so I put a quart of oil in the engine, and we just tried to get to his place as fast as we could. And ended up getting the car to his place, but it turned out that the rear main seal on the motor had gone out. I don't know if it was just placed wrong, but it was my first time building a motor, and I mean, it was just a huge issue to run into when you have, you know, a drive back to Washington from Southern California. But so while all that was going on, while we were down there, I ended up getting, you know, Joey had reached out to me and said, hey, you know, when are you leaving? You know, we'd love to shoot the car for Super Street while you're down here. And for me, it was like I had to be leaving the next day, but I was like, well, I'm not gonna miss out on this opportunity. So I called my work and just got as many shifts covered as I could for the next few days. And we ended up staying down a few extra days. And him and Big Mike came up from LA to Central Coast and shot the car in Avila Beach. And while the car had a huge oil leak going on at the same time. But it was such a crazy experience. Like, we just kept oil in the car and just kept driving around, and did the photo shoot for Super Street, which was just a dream for me. You know, I never expected that to happen. It was my first time ever taking the car to a show of any kind. It was my first time really showing off the car besides like at a local car meet or something like that. So for someone to see the car and to reach out and want to do something like that, it was just a crazy experience, crazy opportunity. And I was just so excited that it was able to happen. And with the car leaking like it was just, it kind of made all that kind of better in a little bit, just because, you know, it was just a cool experience. So after that, we ended up just having to do the rear main seal in my buddy's driveway before I left to Washington. We pulled the tranny, we pulled everything, starter, all that stuff had to come off in his driveway. We ended up doing the rear main seal like until like 10 o'clock at night, the night before I had to leave. And, you know, got it all back together, and car started up, and the leak held, and same motor that I'm on now and same setup that I'm on now, and that was almost 10 years ago now. So it's like, to have the car hold up and you know, make it back to Washington in one piece without any other issues was a very good feeling. So I don't know if it could have gone any different, if it would have been better or not, but it's definitely a story that I will never forget, and an experience that, you know, has really stuck with me over time. And I've met some really good people when I was down there, and since that trip, that kind of opened my eyes. Like, you know, I want to start going to California more. I want to start, you know, getting down and doing more shows, because up here there really isn't there wasn't at the time a lot of shows. You know, there was like hot import nights, and I mean, there was some things, but I really wasn't in the scene up here. I didn't really know a lot of like the shows that were going on. So I started to drive down for like Nisei show off, and I would go down for IBOC, and I ended up starting to go down there like multiple times a year with the car. And so that was just, my first time going down for Nisei. It was just, you see the cars down there, and you see them, see them online and looking at pictures, and then you see them in person, and it's just a cool feeling. And to be a part of that, and to see people from down there appreciate like what what you're doing and how you're building the car it's just a really cool feeling. Especially when it's people that like you look up to, and people that have cars that you just think are amazing and stuff like that. But man, yeah, it's just crazy to think about, honestly. So yeah, I mean, at a certain point, I was going down there so often that I was like, around 20, I think it was 2014, I was like, I'm gonna move down there. I'm going down there so much, and I want to be, I want to be closer to all this for a little while, and see, and see what California is like for a little bit. So I ended up moving down there and ended up getting a job working for my buddies with the EK4, the Javi and Miguel. They ended up, getting me a job with their family business, and I ended up moving down there, and I stayed with their family, and I mean, they were just great people. They just brought me in and treated me like family, and just to, make you feel more at home. They just was able to, be closer to everything down there and live in Southern California. And so I was able to just go to all these shows easier, stuff that I wanted to go do. And it was nice to not be driving, 21 hours one way to go to something that, you want to try to meet. So yeah, living in California was interesting. I did enjoy it, but I'm also a redhead, so I also was like, getting sunburned all the time, and it was hot, and I'm not used to that. Pacific Northwest is my home, and it's not as, hot up here, but it's also, when it's nice, it's really nice up here. But it also can be very wet and rainy up here when it's not nice. But I love it. I love being up here. And I lived in California for not too long. It was a little under a year. I lived in California, and I ended up just deciding, that it was, it was fun to be down there, but I think I enjoyed visiting it more than I enjoyed living down there. I would, driving down there all the time, it was more of an adventure than when, you live down there, it's kind of just something you do. So I ended up moving back up here, just took a job up here, started working, and, I found, I'd still go down there from time to time, but yeah, it's really, going to California was a huge, it was just a fun time. It was the cruising, you're using the car, you're driving the car, as long as you're not running into any issues, it's fun. It makes it, you actually get to enjoy what you built. And yeah, I don't seem to, I mean, I still do drive the car. It's not as much as I would like to now, but once I moved up here, I kind of started looking into the track and doing more stuff, and not just shows and not just taking the car out to meets and stuff, but there's a super nice track about 30 minutes from my house, and I really wanted to, take the car on the track and see how that would be, and try something different from, just doing shows all the time. And so I ended up taking the car out there and did a few track days, and I mean, that has been a totally different experience. You go to the track and you get to watch people run their cars and put them down and see how they perform, rather than just sitting and parking. And that's fun for sure. And going and chatting it up and seeing people at shows, and just, that's what makes it enjoyable, I think, more than anything, is the people. Because honestly, I've met so many good people along the way. Made great friends in California that I'm still really good friends with. I keep in contact with them from, time to time. And, the other good buddy of mine from California is Rob. He had a spooned out EG6. It's just all done up. I just talked to him today, so it's you make these relationships from taking these trips, and these cars kind of, they take us to those places, so it's kind of how we end up getting to know the people that we know now. Like, the forums was really how I started. That's how I used to get to know people, you know? Like, I would just see other people's builds on there, and that was, you know, we had our own, like, everyone on there kind of knew each other, and to, you know, go and finally meet these people in person and get to know people, they become, you know, friends in real life and just not just on a computer screen, you know? But yeah, I think if it weren't for this car, I probably, you know, wouldn't have a lot of the friends that I have now. And I mean, even up here, we have such a good group of friends that we go, anytime it's like this time of year in the show season, and everybody just gets together and knows one another, you know? It's like a good feeling to be able to like link up with the friends and group up and go to these events together, because they are the ones that make it enjoyable, you know? Like, it's fun to, you know, look at each other's cars and this and that, but to get to know the people that, you know, built cars during the same time that you were building cars, and see them in first person. And yeah, I mean, the Northwest has a lot of cool people up here, man. Like, it all started up here for me. Like, that was, you know, the EKs and all that, like, they were just insane. They were so well built and so nice. And it's like, now that I'm at this point now, I'm like, I know the people that build those cars. So it's like, to see it just kind of evolve into what it is now, it's really, it comes down to being about the people more than anything. All right, so since I've been back up in the Pacific Northwest, I started doing just like little projects for friends, like valve covers, and you know, just really just like, that was really how it started, was just doing custom valve covers for a couple friends. And I enjoyed doing that, and I enjoyed seeing, you know, like how people reacted to the product and how they liked what they saw in the end. It was like, it kind of got me thinking, like, maybe I want to, you know, start trying to do more stuff with, you know, cars myself, and more custom projects and little things like that. And you know, when people that you respect and look up to, like, want stuff like your work, they look at your work and they think that it's quality, and they want to put that on their car. That's just, I mean, it's really a rewarding feeling. It's like you're just humbled kind of by the people that want you to do work for them, you know? It's like, you think, you look at their car and you're like, damn, you want me to do, you know, work for your car. It's just like, I'm down for sure, man. Like, let's what do you have in mind, you know? Like, and that's kind of where you know, it kind of all started for C's Customizing. That's, you know, I just do little restoration projects, and you know, to see people, like I said, wanting you to do work for them is just a cool feeling. So I, you know, thought I should start trying to do something like that, and I just came up with this, you know, the whole C's thing kind of looked back for me. It was like, I mean, C's was a brand way back in the day. They made, you know, really nice shifters for cars, and I mean, they since like haven't, they're no longer you know, a brand right now, but it's like, for me, it was like you know, something that I wanted to kind of take on my own. And you know, my name's Cooper, so I figured, you know, Cooper's Customizing was like, I don't know, I didn't really like that as much. So for me, it was like just kind of doing that like 90s type motorsport like logo, and kind of making that, like, not so much making it my brand, but making, you know, my own brand of stuff, and doing it just in a different, you know, a different set, like doing restoration parts for cars, and not so much specific like items. But I mean, it's more so just like doing, you know, taking the shift knob and making it brand new again, like a worn and beat shift knob, and you know, being able to take that and make it look like it's brand new out of the box. And that's just kind of what I want to do. You know, I like seeing a final product. You know, that's where taking something that, you know, you get and it's not so nice, and then you're like, well, you know, you put a little time and energy into it, and in the end it's it can be really rewarding to see something go from what it was to what it is. And funny, speaking about knobs, if it weren't for a Mugen shift knob, I don't think I'd even be having this interview right now, like this story time. It's like that is, I mean, back a few years ago, came across a Mugen knob for sale, and it just happened to be Cullen selling a Mugen knob. So we didn't really know each other at the time. I knew of him just because of his S2000, but I drove up to Seattle and met him up there, and it was both. I think it was kind of a shock for both of us to be like meeting in person. Just was like we knew of each other, I think, but didn't know each other at all. So that was kind of just a funny little. It's just funny how like things like that bring people together, like a shift knob. Like I found a shift knob, and now it's like we know each other, see each other from time to time, and I mean we become friends because of a car part. It's just crazy to see like these cars like I said, they're a part of us, and they make us do stuff that I feel like brings others together and brings us all together, and that's the camaraderie and the friendship that comes from these cars is really is worth everything, man. Like it's a cool experience for sure.